I'm a great lover of long grass and bulb lawns, and I think everybody should have them in a garden because long grass is actually very good for wildlife. A very funny story about the best beloved. He doesn't do very much weeding in the garden, but this particular day he took it on upon himself to weed the area under the study window. I had grown Ophiopogon through it. It took nearly 10 years for it to sort of spread all the way through the border. Well, he came in on this particular day and said, he said, I've taken that Ophiopogon out. He said, it was everywhere.
Hello and welcome to episode 42 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking a little bit like Dennis the Menace, if we can see all of his red stripes, is Alan Edward Herbert Gray, very naughty as ever, our happy and handsome horticulturalist.
And over in Cambridgeshire on this grey and rainy day, lighting up our screens with the most wonderful warm smiles is Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson. I got it right this time.
Doesn't always happen, but that was beautifully delivered, Alan. And we are giddy, we are excited because we have got a guest we've been really looking forward to talking to. I mean, we look forward to talking to everybody, obviously, but we've been after Dan Cooper for a little bit, known as the Frustrated Gardener, and I follow your exploits on Instagram all the time, Dan. How are you? Welcome to Talking Dirty.
I'm very well, and it's not too bad here weather-wise. It's quite okay, actually. I'm in this funny little bit of England called Thanet, which just sticks out into the English Channel, and the weather just misses it sometimes. So we're okay, actually, today.
Do you know
it's
what?
Lovely to be here. This is very exciting.
Well, I'm excited to see this view, Dan, because I've heard so much about your garden room. I've seen lots of shots of it, but I've never got to see it from your Zoom camera. And it does look like you're sitting in a jungle.
Yes, it's always very pleasing to everyone else. What they don't realise is that I'm staring at a piece of plasterboard, because this room is essentially an unfinished part of my house, which I've been very tardy about finishing, and so it just got filled with plants. In front of me, where I'm looking, apart from at your lovely faces, is a piece of green plasterboard, and beyond that is a bathroom that is yet to be. But but the plants are very happy here. It's particularly those that don't like too much sunlight. So very good for begonias and ferny things and gingers and stuff like that.
And Streptocarpus.
I have got Streptocarpus. Yes, it's saxorum is just up here.
Yeah, I can see it.
Just sort of kept it going.
I spotted that because it's one of my favourites. In actual fact, I bought a couple the other day. I went off I had my second COVID jab on Sunday, and on Tuesday felt decidedly under par. And so I didn't really feel like being social. So I took myself off, and somebody told me about a little nursery down in Suffolk, and I thought, well, I'll go and find this little nursery. Well, a fool and his money, they say, don't they? I know, please take my credit card away. I'll still find the cash if I want the plant. That's the trouble. And I bought some Streptocarpus saxorum, having lost it. I put mine in the garden last year and forgot to dig it up, but I've got it again, so it's marvellous.
I mean, it's really super easy to propagate as well. It's like a weed. I first saw it. I used to have to go to a beautiful part of Germany, just on the border with the Netherlands, and stayed in this very dreamy castle, and all of their window boxes were full of only Streptocarpus saxorum, and I had no idea that it was, could be used as a sort of bedding plant, basically. But it just looked so pretty, so I've always grown it after that, and there is a white one as well, which Dibleys have, I think, if we're allowed to mention names.
Oh, mention away.
Yeah.
Dan, you've just given me an idea for an urn that I do in the garden here for this summer. And I normally do it in the cliche silver and white combination. And I just suddenly thought, now I know where I can buy saxorum from, I'm going to use that as well. So another trip to this nursery.
It's lovely when you find a nice nursery, though, isn't it? Because they are few and far between. Well, particularly ones that you've not heard of. So it's always a bit of a treat, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
See yourself.
Yes.
Now, the watch house is, well, it seems to be a super stylish house and a super stylish garden, but it is amazing, I think, how much you fit in. Do you know, kind of square footage wise or size wise, exactly what kind of a garden space you are able to experiment with, Dan?
Yes, I think I do. I'm glad you didn't ask me for meters, because that would have thrown me completely. But the jungle garden, so the bit that sort of faces east towards the sea, that's 20 foot by 30 foot. And then the little bit that's just out of these doors here is 20 foot by 20 foot. So tiny, you know, completely urban, so surrounded by other buildings, which, you know, has its own challenges. But no, really very small, but probably, you know, not uncommon to what a lot of people would actually have at home as well. So it's just, I cram a lot in, I think.
You certainly do. And I suppose, much like a couple of weeks back when we visited Richard Hobbs, having an allotment as well becomes a real saving grace in that situation.
Yes, I mean, you know, the whole frustrated gardener thing stems from lack of space and lack of time, really. And of course, being blessed with quite a lot more time as a result of lockdown and not having to commute to London every day and all of that. But the space thing has only really been alleviated by having the allotment, which is great. We feel very lucky because we got it at a time when the waiting list was sort of 5 or 6 months, and now I think it's in excess of 3 years. So got it just at the right time, really.
And you trial, you know, say you want to put tulips in the garden, you actually trial them at the allotment before they, I suppose, earn their place in your special smaller areas.
That's right. I mean, I let's be clear, I am a kleptomaniac when it comes to plants. It's I don't think that's uncommon either in the gardening community, but it's you know, there are many rules that I should follow that I probably don't. But yes, the allotment's a great opportunity, I guess, to just assess. I mean, particularly with something like tulips, it's quite it's very, very hard sometimes to tell what colour they're actually going to be. I mean, catalogues and websites are rarely very accurate, are they, in there? And I'm sure it's not deliberate, but
no, you know, I mean, the whole thing is the quality of the picture, the exposure on the day, the light and everything else. And you're absolutely right. You know, the one thing you cannot beat is going to visiting gardens at tulip time, or London parks for that matter, because London parks are a great source of inspiration, I think, when you're seeing, if you're comparing one tulip against another, because, I mean, they do splurge a bit on their tulips, and we can actually, I've got one in the garden. I haven't got a clue what it is. I planted it in January, in actual fact. It's just coming out, and it's a yellow tulip, but it's got the most incredible shaped flowers that kind of curl around the edges and they're all crinkled up. It's not a disease, I can tell you that, but it's. I mean, I think yellow tulips, quite honestly, boiled eggs on stick tulips, they're boring, just boring. You want something with a bit of a twist, a bit of a curl, a bit of a personality, I guess.
Yes, I mean, I do quite like the sort of weird and wonderful to a point. I have actually bought in. I went out this morning. We had rain. We had rain last night. It was like a miracle. But of course, all the things that I planned to pick for this morning were then soaking wet. But they're splendid and dry again now. But yeah, I do. I like to see what these sort of more unusual tulips are like, and then if they are attractively unusual, then they get a place in the garden. But we've got one up at the allotment called Labrador, which is a very sort of beautiful, sort of conquery, ebony, dark one, but it's got these very fringed edges to it, and that's really lovely because it's just a little bit, you know, just a little bit of extra interest to look at, I guess. But I mean, we've been amazed this year at how many quite well-known tulip varieties, you know, not brand new ones, grown alongside one another are, you know, there's not much to tell between them. but at least it does mean that you can sort of discount one or the other and then save yourself and try something else. But it's been a funny year, so I think you'd probably need to grow them all again to check whether it was just the strange weather, dry, cold weather we've been having that means that they've flowered at certain times, or whether that is in their nature. But yes, a bit of fun, and it's a bit of extra space to be experimental, I suppose.
It's also an extra space where you can do a bit of composting, for instance. I mean, where do you get, I'm just thinking 20 by 30 and 20 by 20, where the hell do you put your rubbish? Where do you get?
Well, until we had the allotment, that was a big problem because, as I expect we'll come on to at some point, everything here is in a pot pretty much. So I'm quite religious about sort of changing the compost regularly for obvious reasons, mainly vine weevils. But where to put all of that was a real challenge for years. And of course, now we have the allotment, all the compost goes on the beds and all the green stuff goes in the compost heap. But before that, it was just a case of sort of getting rid of it at the tip and things like that, which, not the way you'd like to do it, but
it's a waste. I was just sort of thinking, I was just wondering whether the roadside verges around and close to your home were not some of the best producers of wonderful wildflowers, if you like.
I can tell you, it's fascinating to see what comes up on the allotment there. I mean, things that I haven't actually succeeded in growing from seed deliberately appear. So I have the most exotic soil. I mean, whoever gets the allotment after us is going to have echiums, Geranium maderense, lilies, all sorts of things sprouting up. I had Nicotianas coming up all over the place last year, and I don't even remember growing any of those. So
I'm torn about what to talk about next, but you did mention you'd picked some show and tell that had been sort of drying out. So maybe we should do some show and tell next, because I'm desperate to see what you brought to the party.
Well, I'm surrounded. Would you like daffodils or tulips first?
What should we start with, Alan?
We've been talking about tulips, so let's carry on with the tulip theme before we go to.
I'm going to see if I can do this without tipping water over myself or breaking a vase. So here we are. We've got some tulips. So just about to see me. So my normal colours are I sort of like the oranges and the plums and all the sort of flamey colours. So this is a bit of a favourite. This is Lasting Love, this one. It looks very dark on camera. It's a little bit more red than that. But it's a very, very neat tulip. It doesn't get too tall, and the flowers do last a really long time. So it's one of the later ones, but it's particularly nice. And I have been it's right in front of my face. It's not very well orchestrated. It's probably better looking at the tulip than looking at me. But have been trying to work out what on earth to put with this. I don't know if you saw, I put it on Instagram, but what on earth one does with this dark dimension hyacinth, which is, I think if there was ever a Marmite flower, this might be it.
That's it. I don't like it.
I was given these, so I have grown them, and the bulbs were magnificent. So each bulb has produced 2 of these whopping great flowers. But honestly, that must be one of the most difficult colours to deal with in the garden I've ever come across. It doesn't really. It's like a void, it's not dissimilar to the colour of this. So it just looks like it's a black hole, it sort of disappears really. So I don't know. I shall look after them, but they may end up at the allotment as sort of edging or something.
If you've got space, you could try growing them through a sea of grey foliage like Stachys Lanata, Lanata or something like that. Mm-hmm. or any sort of kind of grey foliage, that make them show up a bit. But I do find the fact that they are so shiny almost looks to me as if they're sort of kind of going over a bit, going off a bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and they're such a bulk, aren't they? There's nothing very delicate about those.
The other thing I was just going to say to you, Dan, is that those, if you keep those bulbs and you do look after them in consequent years, they will be better because the flowers will get less huge, because they've obviously been fed on whatever they've been fed on to get those enormous flower spikes, which come up and then immediately do that. They flop. So, I mean, they're no good in the garden at that size. So they'll probably be better when their flowers are smaller.
Well, that's the only reason they're in at all, is because those were victims of the rain. So that is proof of what you just said. They're not really that garden worthy, are they? But you know, a thing, something to try.
A conversation piece.
And then, I mean, this is Continental. This one, and I really like this one. It's got lovely sort of undertones to it, like almost like someone sort of painted the dark on top of something metallic. I don't know how easy that is to see. And I know lots of people grow Queen of Night and things like that, but I think that's particularly lovely. And I like it with, so this is my sexy tulip of the year. I don't know if that's the thing, but this is like the Alexis Carrington Colby of the tulip world. It's a sort of very 80s lipstick pink, and it's like shot silk. I don't know how easy it is to see, but that's called Attila Graffiti, and I quite like those two together. I think if you can see them together, but I do like those kind of color combinations, strong colors, and they flower at the same time, which is useful. I don't know what you think. Do you like this one, or is that just too?
Yeah, I do, and I like the way that it picks out the kind of shine. There's a dark red shine in the middle of the petal on Continental.
Yes, yeah, it's nice. And then I don't know if you tried this one, Alan, but this is just totally me, and I've picked two just to show how it develops. So this is Slava. I think it's Slava. Is that how you pronounce it? It's got a W in it rather than a B, but
I would say Slava, but I mean, I don't know whether I'm right or whether you are. So it doesn't matter. You say Slava and I'll say Slava.
It's that one. But I think this is probably a very me tulip with the two colours in the same flower, and it sort of starts off a little bit more demure, and then the borders increase. But big fan of that one.
That's fun.
I planted it completely, got sent by accident. This isn't what I ordered. So it's in these pots all full of sort of pink tulips. And then this one is looking not very nice. Then, of course, now this, interestingly, these got really knocked about. This is Exotic Emperor, of course, which I'm sure lots of people are familiar with. But I just love its craziness. It's like a ascot hat, isn't it? With all the sort of extra bits coming off it. But these sort of things do please me, I have to say, just because they are so crazy. I don't know, are you an Exotic Emperor fan or?
Yes, I am. I mean, I love all tulips really that are slightly different. I mean, they've got something about them, and that has those sort of green horn-like stripes on the petals, which I think is absolutely lovely, and it relieves the boredom. I mean, I love parrot tulips, but unfortunately, parrot tulips, they don't stand up to the weather terribly well. Well, this last weekend we had horrendous winds on Sunday or Monday, I can't remember, but anyway. And it completely bashed them about, and they're all sort of floppy and hanging their heads now. They look horrible. But if we get a spell of good weather, parrot tulips are my absolute favourite. They're just so bizarre, I guess.
I find Rococo very weather resistant. I don't know if you've tried that one. It grows very short here, so perhaps that's
the red and green one.
Yes, and it's sort of got everything going on. Really, it's like a parrot, but of course. But,
the colours change as the flower ages, I think. That's a good one. Actually, that's a good one. I remember that because I do remember it being looking down and seeing in a big pot amongst all the others, but it was in there, not out with them, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Then I thought I would bring something tasteful in, and I haven't done a very good job of it actually, because you can't see the foliage. But this one's called Poco Loco, and it's sort of, I think you would call it nude, if I can say that word on your podcast. But what's so lovely about this is that it has almost silvery foliage, and that you can't really see it, but it's because was looking at it this morning trying to work out why it looks so sort of silvery, and it's because there's lots of very fine hairs on the surface of the leaves. So if you were going for a really tasteful garden, like you were saying, Alan, you had a lot of sort of Mediterranean silvery colours. This would be very sophisticated, which is not a word that's often been associated with me, but it would be very nice. And then the last one is more in the interesting camp. I'm dripping all over myself here. So this is Design Impression, which has the variegated leaf. Yeah. It's sort of hostery-like when it's coming up. And of course, the flowers do have a bit of a sort of, I guess, what would you call that, sort of tangerine feathering on them, as well as being that sort of baby pink inside. But I'm quite fond of that one. And that when they come up and they're late, they're a real treat, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
I always feel very blessed to have them when they come up like that.
Just how much water have you managed to get over your body showing us the tulips, Dan?
It's all right. I'll drip dry.
I also like that you brought a nude tulip to the Talking Dirty podcast. That feels very apt.
I mean, that is not a colour I would choose deliberately, and that if in the catalogue of that particular bulb merchant, that did not look that colour. But it's a pleasant surprise. I would never have ordered it otherwise. I always get one or two things that I didn't order. I've actually got a daffodil here, which is supposed to be Hawera. I think that does have a W and not a B.
It does.
And it is definitely not Hawera, but it's really lovely. So I'll get my Scamps catalogue out and try and work out what it actually is.
Yeah.
But, It doesn't matter, does it? I mean, it does matter when you've got a lovely composed colour scheme, but then you just pick them all and have them indoors instead. So
that's what you do. We had, tulips have this habit that they sometimes put down a dropper bulb from the bulb themselves. They'll put a kind of rhizomatous shoot out and go down underneath the bulb, perhaps another 6 or 8 inches, even deeper into the soil. So that when you take your tulips up and you put the new ones in for next year, you suddenly get last year's tulips coming up, the odd ones. And we had a very red scheme, I think, a couple of years ago, and I had to go through them the other day and pick all the red ones out because they weren't in this year's scheme. And so we had a lovely big bunch of bright red tulips on the morning room table here, courtesy of the fact that they'd been dropping.
Yeah, well, that's, winning both ways there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a bit of a bonus.
I do remember when I probably thought one of my first ever tulip orders, and I was so excited. I absolutely adore orange. So I'd ordered, I don't know if it was Cairo or Princess Irene or something that was going to be really fabulous and fiery. And I didn't get that. I got the most insipid, dirty knicker pink, pale, pasty, just loads of this pink tulip. And the most galling thing about it is it must be the best doer. It must be the most perennial. Every year it comes back. Fortunately, it was my mum's garden, so she's stuck with them now. I don't have to look at them anymore. But every year they just come back so reliably, and you just can't get rid of them. And then you have to sort of stop presenting them because actually they're just performing for you every year, even though they weren't remotely what I wanted.
Well, Queen of Night does that too quite a lot. She's a good doer in the garden. She will keep coming back, but that she doesn't matter quite so much because she doesn't clash with anything in particular. She's just there being dark and moody in the background, which is absolutely fine.
Mm. Last year I managed to have 5 of the wrong dahlia, but all the same wrong dahlia. So I ordered Mel's Orange Marmalade from 5 different places. and I got 5 Fantasie Du Caps, which, if you look that one up, is probably deserving of the name, but it's not orange, and you can have too much of it. So, but definitely with dahlias, it does seem to be that murky pink is a colour you quite often get if you get the wrong dahlia as well.
Yeah. Or you can be really shocked, and you can get a dahlia, which I always think should be said in an Australian accent. The name should be, if you can say in an Australian accent. I will attempt it. It's going to be bad, but never mind. But she is a cactus dahlia, and she is kind of red and yellow with bits of orange in there and all the rest of it. And her name is Lady Darlene.
Oh, that's brilliant. I do think dahlia hybridizers are on something, though, don't you? Because the names are getting more and more crazy.
Yeah, they are. But I mean, you know, one of the things that I do here, Dan, is I always raise a few dahlias from self-sown seed. Not huge numbers because I don't have the space, but you know, 20 to 50 plants, and we just line them out somewhere. And if there's a good one, we keep it. And if they're, you know, 9 times out of 10, you don't want to keep them because they're not good enough. But sometimes there is a rather nice one. There's a very nice single black one, which really is very dark red, of course. But sometimes the way the singles curve their petals at the tips or something will make it stand out as opposed to just the plain ones. So it's always worth doing, I think.
You're going to have to start giving them crazy names. So you're in with all of the dahlia breeders and their exciting naming.
I want to be out with the dahlia breeders. I want my names to stand out. I don't want to do Lady Darlene.
I do also love the man with 32 acres telling the man with a tiny urban garden that he doesn't have enough space.
Well, you know what
I was letting that one go.
Now, we've had wonderful tulip show and tell, but we also were promised some narcissi, which are lurking somewhere off screen. So what else have you got, Dan?
Well, again, I mean, where I am, I mean, similarly to Alan, not far from the coast, in fact, you know, very, very close in my case, and on the east side. So daffodils are normally a sort of distant memory, really, in my garden by now, but I've got more out now than at any time so far this season, which is just mad. And it probably is a little bit to do with which varieties I chose to grow this year, but also just, I think, a sign of how cold it's been. But I picked a few of the ones that I like. This one here being an exception to my rule, because I loathe the split corolla ones normally. I think they're an aberration too far, really. But this one's called Lemon Beauty. It looks a tiny bit overexposed, but it's sort of like, just it reminds me of a lemon meringue pie. It's a very, very pretty daffodil, I think. Its only drawback being that it's got sort of hellebore-like tendencies in that it nods downwards very, very pronouncedly, if that's a word. So I was saying to the beau the other day that this is one that you would need to plant on top of like a Cornish hedge or something like that, so that you could get a really good view of it from sort of lower down. But it's absolutely beautiful, I think. Sort of like lemon curd swirled through cream or something like that. Pretty.
Split Corona Narcissi, we grew one this year in pots, which was exceedingly nice in actual fact. And I like Dan. I mean, I don't really like them. They are a bit of an abhorrent. I think if the problem with them is if the middles are too big or they're different colours, it's like the flowers turned inside out and it's showing you its insides, its internal organ. But we grew one which was basically a daffodil with a yellow split trumpet laid flat back against these outer petals, and it was called Banana Daiquiri, and that actually looked nice because it was odd. It did look quite exotic and quite orchid-like, but it fitted in very well with our scheme, which was really just yellow and cream wallflowers and these yellow banana daiquiri followed by cream and yellow tulips.
I believe banana daiquiri is probably Lady Darlene's drink of choice, is it not?
Well, there's no flies on you, mate, I'll tell you. Nice one, I like it.
Anyway, right. So, so this is, I don't know if you, it's very difficult with colour to see if you can see that. This one's Salome.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating because it opens with a very, very sort of bright lemon yellow trumpet. And then it slowly sort of goes this beautiful sort of soft, peachy colour. So they first started coming out and I thought, oh God, I've mixed two varieties together in that pot because they look so different between when they are just coming out and when they're starting to fade. But quite subtle, that one. I like that one very much. And then if you want a tinier version, this one's Cotinga. Again, you can really see with this one that it has that downward facing habit. So, and you have to be quite careful with this one because if you lift the head up to get a close look, they actually snap. So it's one that you want to be growing, you know, a little bit higher up if you can. But very demure little thing, which I thought was nice. And for your troughs, Alan, because I know you were talking about those last week, weren't you? That
Yep.
Sun Disc is just coming out. That's a tiny little thing, but really nice. I just like these sort of hangers on that appear at the end because they're like yeah, we want to keep going, but very, very cute. This one, I'm a bit of I love a bargain, and our local garden centre was just selling pots filled with unnamed bulbs right at the end of the season, and I just bought these and thought, well, what the hell, let's see. But really pretty, obviously Sun Disc, I think. And then the sophisticated one, because I felt I should have one. This one's Misty Glen, and the trumpet is almost like a greyish. I mean, if Farran Ball designed a daffodil, this would be the one, because the middle of it is a beautiful sort of greenish grey. It definitely looks like a designer designed this one, but it's a really nice late tulip. And then before I go on about this too long, this is my Herrera substitute, which is very jolly and very, very yellow, but nice. I'll put them down now.
They're wonderful. What I find interesting is my other half, who's not a gardener, but is very good at kind of being dragged around gardens and going to the garden centre and nurseries and things a lot. And he can never get over the fact that I like really showy flowers when it comes to dahlias or tulips or, well, anything really, big and bold and probably a bit brash. But daffodils, I go very much for that vase that you've just produced, much more demure and paler and probably, you know, not quite so ostentatious. And it seems you go down a similar route.
Yes, I think so. Maybe I don't know. There's something about tulips, the sort of honesty of a tulip. Daffodils, that I don't feel they should be messed around with too much. I've just got the new book that's out, newish book out about daffodils, which is really fascinating, going into all of the sort of history of their breeding and you know, the people who really sort of progressed them through to the you know, the 70s, when they were a serious agricultural crop. And we actually, down in Cornwall at Rosewarne, they spent a lot of time and money developing daffodils as a sort of commercial crop, and that's when we got the Carltons and the sort of great big strong burly daffodils that would make it to market in good shape. And then I think now people are sort of going back to a more naturalistic view of them, but the most extraordinary history daffodils have got.
You mentioned Scamp's catalogue a little while ago, and I think if you look in there, you will see there's a historic section of daffodils and narcissi, which are referred to, I think, very charmingly as old ladies. Some of them come from the, some of them come from the 1800s, 1900s to early 20th century. But they have about them a charm, and I can speak from experience in that lots of them, which were probably late 19th, early 20th century, and they probably were grown as crops, as you say, for the flower trade. They actually are much daintier than, shall we say, Carlton, because Carlton was a big, strident, butch-looking thing. But they're much daintier than that, but they still have that flower power, and they make up like the very devil itself. I mean, you plant one bulb and you'll have 2 flowers on from that one double bulb or something, and then 5 years' time, you'll probably get 10 flowers from it. They are that generous, if you like. And I think they have about them a certain charm. They're not too tall, they're not too heavy. They will take the weather, which I think is an important thing in our gardens today.
Yeah, we've got a church yard near to us, and I didn't do anything very scientific, but we went up there this spring, and you can virtually date the tulip variety to the date of the grave. Sounds a bit morbid, doesn't it? But I actually found one.
Oh, you're talking tulips now or narcissi?
We're talking narcissi.
Yeah.
Was I saying the wrong thing again?
Yes.
See, this is water, I promise. But no, so you could date the narcissi almost to the time that the grave was put in place, and so we managed to, by that means, we managed to work out that this particularly lovely daffodil, we managed to find out what it was by looking at that particular time period, which I think was around sort of 1927, and found that is roughly when that daffodil was first introduced into horticulture. So they're very interesting. Hedgerows and graveyards are a great place for daffodil spotting.
They are now, but they won't be in the future, because how many people do you know today that actually plant bulbs on graves? I don't personally know of anybody. I mean, when I was a small boy, my grandmother and I used to go on our bicycles to the local churchyard, having picked flowers at her house in the morning, and do the graves, not just for our relatives, but she had friends who lived close by that perhaps they were disabled and couldn't get to the churchyard, so we'd do their graves as well. And we used to each have a little pair of miniature shears for clipping the grass on the graves as well. It was a lovely thing. It's a lovely thing. I hated it as a child, because you were told we've got to go and do the graves. I don't want to do that. But it's a lovely memory now to look back on, and something that is not done anymore. And I don't think that we'll be dating daffodils, or our grandchildren will be dating daffodils like we can today.
No, you're right. I mean, my grandmother was, my heritage is Cornish, so hence I'm probably the passion for daffodils and all things sort of tropical and tender, really. But no, my grandmother was absolutely fastidious in the same way about the upkeep of graves, and indeed, as you say, not just for the family, but friends. And we used to, I remember, same as you, changing the blooming water and traipsing backwards and forwards with. Anyway, yes.
You mentioned there the latest sort of newish daffodil book. You are really hot on your horticultural literary releases as well. You're always sort of doing book reviews and keeping an eye across that. I don't know how you have time for all of this, Dan.
No, people always say that, but I don't know. Somehow, I mean, I am. This is my passion, I guess. So you just find time, don't you, for things that you're passionate about. So I'm just as bad with books as I am with plants. And although there's a slight sort of winter summer difference, I do spend a lot more money on books in the winter and less in the summer. But it's still not good. I mean, no one has a bank manager these days, do they? But if I had one, I think they would have, left me for dead some time ago. But yeah, no, I do like to keep up with what books are coming out. I mean, on the surface, it can sometimes seem very repetitive, because there are a lot of people who write books on pretty much the same subject. But then there are some absolute gems that come out. I mean, this daffodil book is, and I've got a few. You know, there's quite a different angle. It's clearly amazingly well researched. So
one of the great things about books is that we never stop ever learning things, and I liken gardening books to perhaps to recipe books. And if there's 3 good recipes in a recipe book, it's worth the money. If the gardening book gives me 3 new plants or 3 ideas or 3 somethings, then it's worth the money, because it's made me think in it. My brain goes off at a tangent and thinks in another direction. That can only be good.
But what's also extraordinary, Alan, I think, is, you know, I'm not a technophobe in any way, but the depth of information that you get from a book, whether it's new or old, there is no way that is equaled on the internet. And I don't know what it is. You know, I don't think people have the attention span on the internet. Probably.
I think probably what it is it's too impersonal. On the internet, I mean, if you take some of our greatest garden writers, my hero has always been Christopher Lloyd, but you take his use of the English language, his turn of phrase, you won't find anything like that on the internet, and you'll get the people's personality coming through. Beth Chatto, her personality came through. You can tell from reading her books that she's a school teacher, as you could from when she spoke to you. I mean, however well you knew her, and I knew her well, you know, you could still tell that she was a school teacher, which is fascinating.
Yeah, and you can also tell if you can relate to that person. You kind of think, well, okay, if they thought that, then I would probably think that too. I've just got another Beverly Nichols book on eBay, and I read it, and I sit there thinking, oh my God, this is probably what I sound like. I think I'm probably him reincarnated a few years later, because I probably acquired some of his, but I do love it.
I can remember there's a book that I've got somewhere in the house here of, he was growing regale lilies, or regale lilies, call them what you will, and he grew masses of them and loaded them up into the car to bring them up to London. And I mean, the hilarity of him describing packing this car up, being flooded with this wonderful scent and everything else. I mean, it was pure Beverly Nichols. You just couldn't get away from it. It was such fun.
Yes. And I think it was Garden Open Tomorrow that I read before this one, and his description of being asked to, you know, everyone asks you to design their garden if you're, you know, and then he described what the actual outcome of those discussions always was that basically no one really wanted you to design their garden. They wanted what they wanted. And I think he was marched out of someone's house in Surbiton at some stage because he basically made suggestions that they were appalled by. So he was sort of asked to leave by the lady of the house. But you know, these sort of things, I mean, people don't write like that anymore, do they, anyway? But hilarious stuff.
Though, of course, I mean, you've not necessarily got tons of books to your names, but you've got, what, 10 years of your Frustrated Gardener blog to your name with some pretty great writing on it.
I don't know how that happened, really. As you know, I like to experiment with things. I think I was on holiday in June, and it was the Olympic year, I think. And I thought, oh, I don't know what blogging is. Someone had said something, and I thought, well, I don't know what a blog is. So I thought, well, I'll have a look. And then I tried. I thought, well, I'll maybe have a go at writing a post and see what this is all about. And of course, that sort of started it off. And you know, at the time, I was very. I was feeling quite disconnected, I think, from my love of plants, and my work was very all-absorbing, and I really wanted to find a way to reconnect a bit and not lose, you know, what I'd learned and things like that. And the blog sort of helped me, I think, by pushing me into researching things and looking at things a bit more deeply. And yeah, it just went on and on. I really don't know how that happened. But you know, it's one of those things, you have to do it for yourself, because otherwise it would just become an absolute chore. And I probably don't write it as much as I used to, but I do enjoy it, and I do enjoy the sort of connection you get with the people who read it as well. It's a nice thing to do.
It is that lovely kind of very generous, encouraging gardening community that you then sort of become part of. And I suppose in some respects, a bit like with this podcast, you get so much inspiration back as well. I mean, I in particular learn so much every week doing this. And even Alan, who, you know, knows so much already, is...
He's so old.
But there is always stuff to learn, and there are so many people who are keen to share in the kind of online gardening community, be it blogging or Instagram or podcasting, Twitter, whatever it might be.
I hear these tales of people. I mean, of course, Beverly Nichols was great at telling tales of people who were quite rude when his garden was open. But I don't know whether I'm just very lucky, but I never experienced this side of gardening folk, really, because whether the garden's open or whatever it is, people just always seem to be terribly kind and generous. So hopefully my luck doesn't run out at some stage.
Can I just illustrate a very, very quick point? Sometimes these things happen. There was a lady looking at my Brugmansias here in the garden one day, and she said, "Oh, do you take them in?" And I said, "Yes." "Oh, we leave ours out, you know." So I said, "Oh, do you?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Well, you've left them out, and how are they doing?" She said, "Well, they haven't flowered yet. This was in October." What's the point?
Yeah, I think Alan you might get your fair share of people who are quite vocal about things they don't approve of.
I don't care. Yes, I don't care anymore. I don't mind, you see, because I've long since I don't take offense at other people's remarks, because we should not all like the same things. Everybody has an opinion, and if they don't like my garden, they don't have to look at it. I mean, I don't ask them or force them to come and look at it. If they don't want to and I never see them again, why should I care?
And I would think, judging by the spectacle of your Brugmansias, which I don't think I have never actually seen them in person, but I've seen many pictures of them, I would imagine that you have pretty good grip on how to grow them, because they are extraordinary.
Well, I've learned through trial and error, you know, and experience, really. Granny always grew them at home. She had a pot outside the back door of her cottage with a Brugmansia in it, and it would be probably a metre tall, including the pot. And we'd just look at these big bells hanging there, and they'd come in flushes and all the rest of it. Then I went on my first holiday abroad, and we went somewhere in Spain, and I saw them growing as trees. And I thought, that's how I want to grow them. But of course we can't, because they're not hardy. But I could do it by elevating them into a container, much as you were talking about with your Narcissus, Dan. But, you know, elevate them up so that you can actually look up into their trumpets. And that was really how I got to growing Brugmansias on the scale that I do. I mean, it's just another form of pruning and manipulation. I mean, when we take them up, we root prune them, we top prune them, we squeeze them into the greenhouse. They look as if they're going to die. They never do. They come back. And I always tell people, remember, a plant, it doesn't want to die. It always wants to live.
I mean, they're not pretty beasts, are they? Mine are just sort of showing some leaf now, but I'm very unkind to them through the winter. They don't even get very much light. They go in the garage. But then, you know, in a few months' time, that'll all be forgotten, won't it? And there'll be
yes, exactly.
The only one I can keep outside all winter, and I only put it away for one night, was Sanguinea. And that one, but it is in a pot, and it's in shelter.
I thought you were going to say that, because I've been to, we've got friends that live on Guernsey, and I've sometimes been over there December and January, and because Sanguinea, in both its red and its cream form, they're flowering away as shrubs in the garden, what, 1.5 meters tall and across. And I mean, it was mind-boggling when I first saw it. I couldn't believe it. I thought, what? I don't try and keep them outside here, because I don't think they would survive. And I don't want to look at, you know, bananas in their pajamas and things throughout the winter and all of that. So I don't wrap anything anymore. It's got to fend for itself, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'm very much the same. I can't be bothered with I mean, it either survives or it either comes indoors or it takes its chances. But I can't be bothered with things that sort of mummified.
I am thrilled about one success this year, which is now 3 years running we've had it from the same plant. You mentioned earlier on that on your allotment you had Geranium
Maderense.
Maderense. Well, we can't really grow Maderense successfully in this garden, but I've got a white flowered version of Maderense, which is just outside this window here by a garden seat. Yes, exactly, with a little red eye. And
Guernsey White.
Yes, Guernsey White, that's the one. Now you know where the seed came from. And
I was about to ask you if you wanted any, but you clearly don't need any. So, but...
No, but I'll have something else, so put your thinking cap on.
I will. But we are very lucky here because Maderense, I don't think we had any real frost here, although it did snow. But I mean, as you know, Maderense can't cope with anything below freezing. It's and ours looked like something off Doctor Who. You know, they when they get too cold, their arms go down, and they often like make it through a few months, and then they will rot later because basically the frost has destroyed all the tissue, and so they sort of die this slow and painful death. But we very fortunately, because I've got, I mean, in the small space I've got, I must have 20 or so plants, and half of them survived and the other half didn't. So we're just getting, I bought in a leaf because this is what I just literally just before you sent the link, I thought, oh, people might like to just see how, you know, how big these leaves can, and this is not a big Maderense leaf because I lost all the big leaves went in the cold, but this is one that they've sort of kicked out since. But they are most amazing. I mean, even if you never get them to flower, they're worth it for the foliage, aren't they?
They are.
Really amazing things. The only thing, Alan, I don't know if you've noticed, have you ever sniffed one?
No.
It may be, I mean, damp laundry is kind. I would save yourself for something else. They don't smell nice, do they? And they're a little bit sticky. But yeah, things of great beauty if you can grow them.
And we mentioned quite a way back early on in this podcast about the fact that you garden mostly in pots, which is extraordinary. You must get through an awful lot of food and water and hours of looking after them.
Yes, I mean it's not an easy choice. So I mean, when people come to visit the garden, they get very inspired, I think, because it's a small sort of relatable space. But you know, it's not a choice so much as a necessity here, because the bigger garden has cellars underneath it, so it's completely hollow underneath. It has big vaults. Allegedly, there are tunnels down there that go down to the beach because it was a smuggler's house originally. I've never found any evidence of this, but everybody knows in Broadstairs that there are tunnels from the cellars to the beach. So I don't have any soil, so I don't have the opportunity. The only place I have a tiny bit is just outside these doors here, and I tried to plant a miscanthus last weekend and a clematis, and you know, clematis need to be buried quite sort of deeply. And you know, 6 inches down, I am, you know, needing to use a pickaxe to get through solid chalk. So there, it's I suppose putting them in pots is a kindness to the plants, because otherwise they've just got to deal with solid rock. But you know, it is incredible what you can grow in a pot. That is one thing I would say. Whether it's the best way to grow it or not is another thing. But if you've got no choice, then it's good. And I've got my last thingy to show you, which I was sort of conversing with an orchid expert about the other day. But you know, I don't think these really belong in a pot unless they're at sort of Wisley in the Alpine House or something. But you know, I've been reasonably successful with these Cypripediums. I've sort of got 10 different ones now, and actually, providing you look after them okay, they will exist quite nicely in a pot. And of course, for a brief spell of time, you can bring them in and enjoy them for a couple of days. I don't think, you know, Cypripediums like cool, so they wouldn't like to be indoors very much. But yeah, so you can grow things. And I suppose the other joy of growing in pots is, of course, you can plant them to suit them. So I can grow things next to each other that no one else could if they were growing it in their garden, because you can have something in ericaceous compost and something that likes alkaline soil next to each other. But yeah, it's a different way of gardening, not the easiest way of gardening, probably.
But certainly inspiring, because I don't think there's a garden living who hasn't been at a nursery or a garden centre and when asked, where are you going to plant that, has said, I don't know, but I'll definitely be able to put it in a pot. So it's inspiring for us all. Now, we're going to run out of time, so I suppose we best squeeze in some Flomo before we wrap up this episode of Talking Dirty. My Flomo comes from, it must be weeks or months back on your Instagram. You posted this amazing photo. I think I've written it down so I don't get it wrong. Impatiens pink nerves.
Oh, yes.
Which
yes.
just looked fabulous. And I loved your description. I'm quite often taken in by the descriptions that people put alongside plants. You said emerges from its pot in glorious technicolor. And if there's one thing I'm after in my life, it is glorious technicolor. So I was quite taken by that. Tell me more about it, because I don't really have many Impatiens. They've come up on previous podcasts, but yeah, it looked very enticing.
Well, this is interesting, isn't it? Because my friend Andrew, who is a much better gardener than I am, messaged me to say, don't tell people to plant that thing because it spreads everywhere and you'll never get rid of it. But of course, when you grow things in a pot, you don't realise this because they are contained. But it's there are a lot of Impatiens that are pretty hardy, actually. I think that is hardy if you grow it sort of somewhere sheltered in nice sort of woodsy soil. It's probably fine. I just take them in to keep them out of the way in the winter. But there are several. There's Omiana as well, I think, which is quite hardy. I've got Arguta as well, which I literally just snapped bits off last summer and planted them in the ground, and I thought, well, they'll die in the winter and I go back to the mother plant, and yet they're sprouting up all over the place. So
beneath the soil.
Mm.
Yeah, huge tubers.
Yeah. Well, Tinctoria is honestly, the size of those tubers, they're crazy, aren't they? But yeah, so it's lovely. But I would think of it like you would planting mint, if my friend Andrew is correct, and make sure that it has some boundaries.
Well noted. What I love with Flomo on this podcast, which is obviously this kind of plant-based FOMO, the plant you want to grow, when we were sort of sending messages back and forth before this podcast, I very much got the feeling from you that you were inundated constantly with things you wanted to grow, being the frustrated gardener with your sort of smaller space, smaller garden. So I'm going to allow you to if you want them, because I feel like that's fair. But what would you bring as Flomo to the podcast?
Well, I like things that are a little bit on the edge. So my first one is an Olearia, which is called Henry Travers. And I saw this in one of those sort of blessed gardens in Cornwall. It was a National Garden Scheme garden, actually, growing as a tree. And it's the most extraordinary thing. Apparently it's quite tricky to grow, but I don't mind But I just having this vision of this sort of daisy tree dripping with these beautiful mauve daisies, and just thinking, whoever invented that had great imagination, because I'd never seen anything like it. It's beautiful. It's definitely a coastal plant. I think it likes to be. It likes the coastal environment, and I think it's probably quite tricky to get going and tricky to propagate. But there are people that have got it. I just don't really have the right spot to do it justice. So that's my number one. And then number two, I'm afraid, has similarities. It's another borderline thing, which is Leucodendron argenteum, which is sadly very endangered in its South African home. But if you've ever been to Tresco, which I'm sure Alan must have been to Tresco,
Never.
Never. Oh,
No.
But when you arrive by helicopter, you're greeted by this row of these trees which sort of sparkle like someone's fashioned them out of platinum or something, and it's just the most beautiful tree when it looks happy, which of course it does on Tresco and probably doesn't anywhere else other than in Cape Town. But that is another plant I would love to grow.
There's some pretty amazing flomos. Well done, Dan. Have you got anything to bring to the table, Alan?
Yeah, well, what Dan was talking about, Henry Travers there, the early area for Henry Travers. I remember seeing that at Inveru in Scotland. I mean, which has that marvellous climate warmed by the Gulf Stream, so they can grow it there. I have had it. Unfortunately, I have too lost it, and I don't think that I really have the right place for it. But hey, why not? I mean, why not try again? My flomo for this week, it comes from the fact that I had a dianthus, which I thought I'd lost. I actually owe Richard Hobbs an apology, because I begged some cuttings and a plant from him, which he kindly gave me. And I think it was on Sunday, I found the original mother plant here in the greenhouse, which I thought I'd lost. I actually thought somebody'd thrown it away, and I was bearing a grudge because I thought they'd thrown it away. So apologies as well. But it's a dianthus called Chomley Farran, and it's one of the old bazaar varieties. There used to be masses of them in the Victorian period, and they have small carnation-like double flowers, and the petals are split in different colorways. Mine is kind of magenta-y mauve and red, and it is what it says. It's bizarre. But it's not that I want to grow, because I've grown that, but I would like to grow Malmaison carnations. I don't know whether you know them, but these are the old French carnations, which are so beautifully scented, and they can almost grow like trees. You put trellis in the pot, a wigwam of canes in the pots and train them to them and everything else. Not the tidiest plants, I have to say, but for the nostalgic display of having something like that in one of my greenhouses, so that visitors can enjoy the scent more than anything else. We grow a rose called Colombian Climber in one of the greenhouses, and the scent, because of the enclosed space, you go in, even with the doors open in the summer, the scent hits you. Another reason people like Brugmansias in the evening, the scent hits you. They say that if you go to sleep underneath a Brugmansia, you never wake up. My answer to that is, what a way to go.
Oh, wow. I think this Flomo might have outdone any other Flomos on any other podcasts. Dan, it has been such a treat. Thank you very much for joining us. What an extravaganza of plants.
Well, I think the pleasure has been all mine, actually. Thank you very much for having me.
Will you come back another season, another time, and share some other things?
Oh, yes. Get me back in the summer when all the gingers are out.
We will. It's a promise. It's a date, Dan.
Before you go, I'd just say one little thing. I've been busy all day, and I'm busy this afternoon, but before I go and be busy again, thanks to Dan, I'm going off to sniff a maderense.
Don't go to sleep under it, though, Alan.
Well, have a lovely day being busy, everybody, and happy gardening.
Happy gardening. All the best. Hello. Oh, you can't see me. I see.
Do your pups want to be part of the podcast, Alan?
They're being visited by their friend Penny, who's a Yorkshire Terrier today, and she comes in and they all sort of muck around together.
On your blog and on social media. Shall we wait until Alan's come back?
That says it all, really, doesn't it? I mean, I've bored him already.
Well, I don't want to make you feel bad, but you've never actually left a podcast.
I think my horticultural career is over before it even really kicked off. Oh no, that's all right. He's going to give me a second chance.